You're visiting the Mom Next Door and our stories of faith. I'm glad you dropped by for a visit. Please stay a while and hear what the Lord has done in the lives of moms just like you and me. Hey friends, so glad you've joined us here today. I'm your host, Pam Fields, and I'm going to kick this one off by saying, go grab your headphones. Today's conversation is just for mamas. Okay, so now that I've given you the warning about that content, this is going to be a sensitive topic episode. So, Dr. Joy Skarka, you're joining me today to share about this book that you just released. And it's called Her Freedom Journey, a guide out of porn and shame to authentic intimacy. That is a topic highly personal and something that maybe a lot of ladies might not share that they need to hear this message. I know that it is very relevant for the women in the church, for the women out of the church, for women that need to have that healing. And so, do you just want to run with that and tell me a little bit about your story and what has drawn you into this work?
Yeah, thanks, Pam. Thanks for having me on. And even as we talk about that, like you said, the word porn, maybe you're listening and you're thinking, oh, that doesn't relate to me. Well, there are so many women who read erotica, which is
Mm.
like a romance novels that so many people don't even consider porn, but they are pornographic. And so we can talk about that today as well, too, because that's really common among the Christian women these days as more and more are just becoming popular. But I love, Pam, that your podcast is focusing on God's faithfulness in our stories because really that's what it's been for me. He has taken my pain through sexual trauma, abuse, and addiction to porn, and made it my passion and my purpose to just help other women and to educate people who don't know that women struggle with these things so that they can help their kids, their young women, and just educate our community, our Christian brothers and sisters. So that's kind of my platform here. And it all started for me. Growing up, we just didn't talk about sex. It was very much put under the rug, shameful if you bring it up. And so I was just a young, curious kid. And I actually was exposed as a fifth grader. A friend just came over, opened up my computer, and showed me porn. And I didn't know what it was at the time, right? I mean, a lot of kids, they're just like, oh, it feels like we shouldn't be doing this, but I don't know what it is. And so that was my case. And it wouldn't become a problem then in my life, but I do think it awakened curiosity and shame. And then it wasn't until college later in life when it would become an issue after I experienced that sexual trauma as a freshman in college. I was date raped on my campus. And gosh, I just had so many questions about what happened and turned to Google, which is a bad
Mm.
sex educator. It's actually how a lot of kids find porn is just a simple Google search. And so that's kind of what got me started on it. And so that's just a little summary there of how the struggle kind of began.
Well, I think there's a lot we could even learn with that, in that we do need to be laying down the rails of communication with our children to be able to give them the vocabulary. Like when you were in fifth grade, had you had the words or the knowledge, like maybe I should talk to somebody about this, that would have been very important. And then later on, as things come up in life and that situation at your college, um, you would have this like open opportunity to go to those people that had had the conversations with you in the past.
Oh yeah, and it's all about like you can start creating that safe culture for your kids at such a young age by just saying, "Hey, if you ever see anything." And there's some great resources. There's a book called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures that actually helps you talk about this with your kids so they know, "Hey, this is something maybe I shouldn't see." And you're right, Pam. When I was in fifth grade, I didn't know that I should tell my parents about what I saw. We had never had conversations about that before. And so yeah, a lot of what I do is help educate parents on you can start having conversations with your kids at very young ages to help create that safe environment in your home.
It used to be a real taboo subject. And I think that's changing. But do you think there's a hesitancy for parents to say, if I talk about this, it will make them curious? And if I don't talk about it, we have some time.
Right. Yeah, I've heard parents say that a lot, but it's good to know that the average age of exposure is between 7 and 11. 7 and 11. And so I tell parents, like, would you rather you be the one to introduce your kids to sex and porn, or would you rather it be porn? Or the kids, their friends, their neighbors? And really, you think you're protecting your kids by not talking about it, but really you're setting them up for not being safe, for not being aware of what could happen. And there are ways you can talk about it age appropriately that makes them just be educated in the topic. So, yeah, I encourage parents, it might seem scary, especially, if older generations didn't have any conversations at all, like maybe our parents and with us. There are a lot of great resources there to help you know how to start these conversations.
Okay, so I'm going to rely on some of the questions that were given to me on your press kit because I think these are so good and to the point. A really basic question, but I think one that maybe we don't have an answer to because we really haven't thrown out the anchor and thought about it. Why is porn wrong?
And so many people ask this. And so at our ministry, I work for a ministry, Authentic Intimacy, and we help couples, singles, who are struggling. And so a couple say, like, well, we're just trying to spice up our love life. Like, isn't that okay? Or, a single saying, well, I need to be educated. Like, I need to know before marriage what I'm supposed to do. And so the reason why that both of those situations are problematic is you're inviting someone else into the bedroom. You're watching another image bearer, someone God created in his image, have sex with someone else when God created sex for a husband and a wife. And the point of that intimacy, is unity. So it brings two into one. And that's a picture of God's covenant love to us. And so we're really breaking that covenant when we look at porn, and it also makes it all about you versus intimacy with your spouse. It's all about giving, serving, that unification piece. But watching porn, it's all about meeting your own needs and your own desires. And it's very selfish instead of selfless. And so, yeah, that's one of the bigger reasons. And it's also not ethical. Sadly, Pam, our world is trying to make the case that there is ethical porn out there, but we are just seeing, you know, there's a huge link to human trafficking, sex trafficking with porn. And so it's hard to say, if there is consent or if there's not consent or there's pressure to perform. And sadly, there's a lot of research that says the performers have to be drunk or high to get through filming scenes all day. So this is stuff you don't think about when you're actually
Mm,
watching it. You're just thinking about a momentary pleasure,
as a
and you're not,
consumer, right?
yeah, you're consuming it, and it's making people objectifications as well. So there's lots of negatives, but that's just a kind of an overall summary.
And that makes a lot of sense for the graphic images. Hop on over to the novels you were talking about. What's the connection there?
Right. And some people say, why is that a problem? Because it's not an image. We're not watching someone else, and a lot of the time it's made up. So novels, fiction, that sort of thing. But the problem is in your mind. So you are picturing something, you're forming these unrealistic beliefs, and it's causing you to not be content in where God has you right now in your current season in your life. And so it's making you unhappy, making you want to, go somewhere else in your mind. Um,
And our mind
and
and our body are connected. So
right.
so sometimes it even like affects you chemically, right?
It does. Yeah. For both of them, it changes the wiring in your brain because of the neurochemicals that are released. So a dopamine rush is released, and you actually can get addicted to this stuff. It's crazy because scientists have compared the brain of drug users, sugar addicts, and porn erotica addicts, and there's a lot of similarities. So it's crazy how it does have an impact on you. And then also, you're really setting up some false expectations for your marriage. Like your Prince Charming husband might not do exactly what's happening in these books that you're reading. But and Pam, like so many young women that I talk to, or even adults now, they say that's how they first got hooked was, oh, I just found a romance novel at my grandma's house and started reading. And that quickly turned into video porn. And so sometimes what starts, you think it's this innocent thing, will spiral into other behaviors.
So it sounds like it makes a difference between, like, if you want to read a romance novel, there are probably some that are out there that are clean and do not bring this about. How would you decipher or determine where to go to find good ones?
Yeah, it's so hard to know who to trust because our culture is just filled with trash. I just learned the word smut. I believe that's the word the
Yeah.
other day for this. Yeah, I
Hmm.
just heard that. I was
Hmm.
like, oh, I had never heard of this.
Yep.
And for me, I think you might just need to do some Googling, like, hey, is there any inappropriate content in this? Or asking friends if you know other people who are Christian readers, like, hey, what fiction? Because there is, like you said, some great fiction with great stories that don't include the garbage.
Hmm.
So I personally am not a fiction reader, so I don't have any to recommend, but
Hmm.
I'm sure there are great ones out there.
Well, I will put the link in the show notes. My friend Trisha Goyer has a group, and I'm trying to remember what it's called. It's like, I don't know, Christian reader fiction, Christian women's fiction, something. And Trisha, I know she has a standard in her writing that she will, she has these parameters she's thought through, and so I know Trisha would be a great author to read. But she does have a group for recommendations, and I will find that and put that in the show notes as well, because I'm not a big fiction reader either.
As a mom, I don't know how anyone has time to read.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your family.
Yeah, so we have two little ones. We adopted our little daughter. She's about 2.5, and biologically had our son. He's about a year and a half. So they're exactly a year apart, which keeps us busy and is just so fun. I just love them. Love being a mom. It's a great title.
So, is there a certain age where you start having those conversations, and what things could we do in different formative years to really prepare our children to have a biblical sexual ethic?
Love that question. There's a great ministry called The Birds and the Bees, and they have the best Instagram content where they actually teach you at every single age how to start these conversations. So I'm even doing it with my toddlers now. So we use the correct anatomy, body parts in bath time, when I'm changing their diaper. My kids know what a penis is. They point to my son. So it's something that's just normal. It's just a normal vocabulary. There's no shame in talking about it. That's one way we're doing now. And so I think as they grow, it's just continuing that, continually adding age appropriate content. One example I love the birds and the bees use is the example of seeds. So if you have a garden, like you can teach them, hey, we're going to plant some seeds, and this is how a baby is born, and then it's watered and it grows. And that's how you can start beginning the sex talk throughout. It's not a one time talk, it's something you continue with every season as they grow.
And again, that open conversation, and just nurturing that it is a safe thing to talk about, and that mom or dad are a safe person to talk about it with, right?
Right. And, you can even model that for them. Like if something is on TV, you can pause and say, hey, let's talk about that. Like, what did you think about that? You can start showing them how to ask questions and how to be and you say, hey, if you ever see something that you feel uncomfortable with, you come tell mommy or daddy, and, we'll get it all figured out. So just, yeah, creating that safe environment where they can ask questions and come to you is so important.
Okay, so for the mom that did not start young, she's jumping in 10 years old, maybe even 13 years old. Where would she start? Same place?
Yeah, Mom, I'm so glad you're listening, and I want you to know it's never you're never too far gone to start this. I mean, yeah, maybe they could have benefited from other conversations, but it's not too late for you to jump in. And so I would totally encourage you to start having these conversations. You could even bring it up by, hey, like, what are you learning at school? What are your friends talking about? But there, you can start today is my message, and having these conversations. So some ways you could do it if they are older, and it might be you might feel a little comfortable uncomfortable, is doing it. They call it peer to peer, like next to each other. So when you're driving, like you're shoulder to shoulder instead of having to look face to face, right? Or you go on a walk, like different ways where you can maybe have these conversations until it starts to feel a little more comfortable.
Hmm. And I suppose there are times when, even when you do present information and you do have open communication, for lack of better terms, you've done all the right things, but yet you found out there was a break in the system, and now your child has been exposed to things that you just really wish they hadn't. Maybe they have started to fall into some sort of addictive behavior, maybe some relationships that you see, well, yeah, this I can, there's probably a reason for this, and now where do I go? How do I pivot? What about that?
Yeah, it's so sad, Pam, like just the world that we live in, you can almost expect that some way or another your kid might be exposed sooner than you'd like. I mean, you can keep them in your home, but even that, you could have a friend come in or a neighbor and show them. So even if your home is safeguarded, like if you have internet filters, and what it's crazy too how kids can get around those. I just learned the other day that porn is now on Spotify. You can actually
Oh my
listen to it.
goodness.
Yeah, so on Spotify, which I never thought of that. You can listen. They have playlists that play the audio. YouTube Kids, not safe. They can find it
Wow.
on YouTube Kids. So it it's just sad that the porn industry knows this and they're marketing to the young kids because they know if they get young kids hooked, they have customers for decades. And that's the sad reality. So, yes, so if you're a parent listening and you've discovered this about your kid, I think the most important thing is to not act out of fear and shame and to respond lovingly and thank them for sharing with you, saying, hey, we're going to get you all the help you need, all the tools you need. You mentioned the friendships. And I think they say, if the five people you surround yourself with, you're more likely to be or something. So you need to help teach your kids how to find better friendships. Maybe that's putting them in a different program or helping them find friends in a church or wherever it is. But, even at church, there's going to be kids watching porn. But really helping them. And these are things you're teaching your kids that are going to be lifelong lessons, how to find good friends, right?
For
So,
sure. Well, and you talk about women finding freedom. So we know that as adults, and I guess I'd be curious, is there a certain age demographic, like is this only for ladies in their 20s? Is this something that you see extend to women in their 70s or older, like that would be a
mhm.
really interesting thing. But we know that if adult women are finding freedom, the young ones can too. So, what are some of those steps that a gal could take to find that?
So some of the statistics, just to answer the first part of your question, you
Yeah, that
definitely
was full.
see.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
That was a
that's
lot of
okay.
questions.
You definitely see a higher percentage for younger generations. So more Gen Zs, younger generations than baby boomers, for example. It doesn't mean the older generations aren't struggling, but it's not as high of a percentage. And the reason why, if you think about it, is those older generations, you used to have to walk into a store to buy porn, right? It was like people could see you. There was a higher chance of, hey, I'm going to walk into this. But for younger generations, it's on your phone. So we do see that younger generation, they are higher percentages of them watching, but that doesn't mean other generations aren't watching it. So um, that's just something to be aware of as you're parenting younger generations, that this is something common. And it's crazy because Barna did a study that actually showed that younger generations think not recycling is worse than watching pornography morally. So they just think, everyone does it. It's normal. It's okay. And so it's something you have to navigate with your kids of why it, like we talked about earlier in the show, why is it actually a problem? Because kids don't think it's a problem. So let's say, Pam, that you are ministering to your kid or just a woman you're discipling, your daughter or a woman you're discipling, and you want to help her find freedom. So the first thing we say is bringing it to the light. Like the enemy thrives in darkness,
Mm-hmm.
and this is for all struggles, right? Like the first step is you got to get out of the darkness and admit that this is something you're struggling with. Confess to a safe person. So whether that's a counselor or a Christian woman at church, a small group leader, whoever it is, a safe person that can help you walk through this. And then after confessing it, that's where you can really begin to dig deeper and find the root issues. So, porn isn't normally your biggest problem. I talk about this in the book. It's actually just a coping mechanism to something deeper, a big issue in your life. So, for me, I was using it to cope with the sexual assault that I went through. For someone else, maybe they're using it to cope with loneliness. That's a big one. Uh, our world is not, we are not meant to do life alone. Yet our world kind of does create, is created right now so that everybody is isolated and
Mm-hmm.
lacking community. And so a lot of the book we talk about is how to grow deeper in intimacy with others and with God, because porn does the opposite. It, cuts off intimacy and makes you feel like no one will love me if they knew what I was struggling with. And so those are some of the big key pieces.
Mm. Okay, so you're going to go into that a little bit more in the book, but at the heart of that are some lies and the things that we believe about our sexuality, they're just wrong, right? I mean,
Hmm.
yeah, wrong, right.
Yeah, and sometimes, Pam, like especially moms when talking to kids about all this, we all have our own junk that maybe we
Yeah.
haven't worked through. And maybe we are afraid, how can I talk to my kids about this when I haven't found healing and freedom on my own sexual brokenness? And so I just want to encourage that mom that if that's you, that doesn't mean you're not qualified to talk about these things with your kids. You can work on use it as a encouragement to work on your own stuff while also helping your kids not experience the same pain and heartache that you experienced. So often, we experience heartaches in our own childhood that we want to protect our kids, and so we just don't talk about it. We're silent, but that's actually not going to help them because they're not going to know. They're not going to be educated, or they have questions and are afraid to come to you. So as moms, I would just encourage you, if you're walking through your own stuff right now at Authentic Intimacy, we have so many books. If porn's not your issue, we have so many books just to talk about sexuality. What is God's design for sexuality? Because that'll help set you free from some of that shame you might feel about talking about these things.
Well, the enemy sure wants to shut us down by shutting us up, right? And then we've kind of given up and given him ground, which we do not want to do. And a really simple thing that just popped into my mind, you were talking about these resources that you have. And I know there's a lot. You work with Dr. Julie Slattery, right? And she's a big author, has written a lot. And I was thinking the logistics of a mama bringing a book like that into the home, she may want to cover that up and put that like, this is only reading that I do when somebody won't see the book cover. Or I just had to wrap a math book for my son, old fashioned paper bag style. And even the openness and vulnerability to allow our children to know that we need to continue to be reformed and refined and that we're constantly learning. I think that would be a huge testimony to our children.
Hmm. Yeah, so true. And Pam, that's something, I have so many books around my house all about sex. My doctorate was in sexual shame, and I have two little ones. So I haven't even thought about that yet. So who knows? We'll get there someday.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I guess, having teenagers and young adults, sometimes when I'm reading books about even parenting, you know, the strong-willed child, we'll just say, for example, that one I read years ago, but it was like if I was reading that now and my teenagers walked in, they'd be like, are you reading that because of me? Are you like, was there a conversation we had? And so, just, like running that through the filter, how will that play off? I think it will only play off to your older children as mom is being teachable. Mom wants to learn. And so, what a great thing. And it may be a conduit for a conversation in the future, which is so great to have. So, one of your areas of study and expertise is simply, you mentioned shame. Tell me more about that. Like, that's emotion, it's a response, but it's more than that. It can become a driving force for some of our actions, right?
Yeah, there's something called a shame cycle that actually keeps you stuck in bad habits. And so, yeah, if something happened early in your life or something that you haven't processed that was shame inducing, it can actually be one of the reasons that causes you to look at porn or causes you to do something that you don't want to do. And so, yes, for my doctoral dissertation, I actually surveyed over 1,000 Christian women and listened to how they experienced shame in their life and if and how they found freedom. And it was crazy, Pam, just to hear some of the stories, a lot of them from family conversations or little messages that they heard from church community about what it's like to be a woman or different things, comments that might have been said. And it caused them to experience sexual shame. And so for them to find freedom, and I think that this perfectly aligns with freedom from porn as well, because shame and porn. There's so much overlap here, especially for Christian women. We didn't talk much about this, but historically, the church has only talked about men struggling with porn.
Mm.
Maybe, I don't know if you've heard any sermons geared towards men about pornography in your church, but a lot of the women I do ministry work with will say, "Yeah, we've never been included in this conversation." So that adds an added layer of shame to this conversation. So some of the ways that they found freedom from their shame and which resulted in freedom from porn, that first one is from knowing God better. So better understanding his character. And why this is so important, because we think God is this judgmental God, that if he fully knew our struggles, our sin, he's not going to love us or we're too far gone. Pam, some women actually doubted their salvation because of their sin struggles. So the first one was knowing God. The second way to be free was from a better understanding of God's design for sexuality. So many people grew up in the purity culture and purity narrative, and there was just so much shame. They didn't know it was okay to be a sexual being and have sexual desires, just had to learn how to steward those desires, right? And then the last way to find freedom, the third way, is that intimacy with God piece and intimacy with community. So intimacy in general lacking and trying to find that intimacy in a variety of ways.
More than messages about porn being directed to men in the church, I think oftentimes what we hear is people that do not believe, those non-Christians, are in that camp. And and as if it doesn't affect the church. And I think that might even be more damaging because it does kind of suggest like, well, if I struggle with that, then I must be on the outside looking in. I must not truly be a Christian. So that makes sense when you were saying people were doubting their salvation.
Mm-hmm.
That makes a lot of sense seeing that.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. And I think that's why, even more important, we need to talk about these issues in our
Yeah.
church communities so that Christians know, hey, other Christian women and men are struggling with these things, and to give them resources and help to find freedom.
Mm. I have done a few other podcasts on similar subjects, and I'm going to link those in the show notes. But tell me about the Ministry of Authentic Intimacy.
Yes. Oh, I just love what we do. We have so many resources for you listening, from not just on porn. on any topic on sexuality you could think of. We've covered a question in a podcast. On our podcast is Java with Julie with Dr. Julie Slattery, or on a blog or a book. And we have online book studies where you can read our books in community and dive deeper. And so if that would be a great place if you're like, I want to learn more and talk about this, but my church, I just don't feel comfortable reading this with them, or they don't offer these kind of groups. We have groups online for that purpose. And so that's a great way to dive deeper into some of these conversations.
That's so great. This current book you've done is published with Dr. Julie Slattery, right?
It is, yes.
And do you have other books that are available that we could find?
So this is my first traditionally published book with Moody
Okay.
Publishers, but yeah, Julie's written, I don't know, 10 books right already.
Yeah.
So we have books for married women, couples to go through. God, Sex, and Your Marriage is such a good book for couples. Rethinking Sexuality is a great book if you just want to know God's design for sexuality, like what's the Bible actually say? And that's great if you grew up in the purity culture. So yes, we have so many different resources out there. And even if you're looking for one, you can't find it. Part of my job is I connect our community with the resources they're looking for. So I'm a perfect resource to help you find what you're looking for.
Yay, I found a resource for resources.
Right. That's me. That's my job title.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so we're going to find you personally over on Instagram, right? And a website?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram at Joy Skarka, and over there you can learn more. I have a webinar if you want to dive deeper into this. I do one-on-one coaching, so lots of ways we can connect. Thanks.
Well, ladies, we are not without hope. There are a lot of good resources here, a lot of people that share this journey, maybe something not spoken of very often, but there are people there. And so, Joy, as we close out, would you just pray for the listeners, for our community? The Bible tells us to carry one another's burdens, and what freedom that gives as well. So, let's be good friends, let's be good listeners, and encourage one another with these messages. So, we'd love
Oh,
for you to pray for us.
yes, I love that, Pam. Yes, I'd love to pray. Oh, God, I just thank you for the listeners today who navigated with us through this topic. Maybe it was their first time listening about this. Maybe they are struggling in silence. God, I just pray whoever is listening, you would give them hope. I pray for the mama navigating this conversation with her kiddos, that you would give her the courage to brave these conversations if it's her first time. I pray that she would just be filled with your Holy Spirit as she answers questions and asks questions and just navigates this, God. And we just pray for your protection. Protect our kiddos, protect them from lies of the enemy, from the evil of pornography, the evils of this world, God, and just help us to be stewards of our home, our resources, technology. Help us to set up everything we need to be further stewarding what you've given us, God. We love you so much. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much for being my guest here today. And I will be finding you online. It was great to meet you.
Great. Thank you, Pam.
We'll see you next week, ladies. Bye bye. I hope that you've been encouraged or challenged in your faith today, and that something we discussed prompts you to grow deeper in your walk with the Lord. If it has, make sure you tell a friend so they can grow along with you. And if you or a friend would like to be a guest and share about God's faithfulness in your life, please email me at podcast@tendingfields.net. Because when we tell of God's faithfulness, we never run out of stories.
Whatever is true, whatever is known.